You know what they say about bureaucracy in the galaxy? It's the one thing that transcends species, dimensions, and the basic laws of physics. The Galactic Classification Committee had been operating smoothly for roughly 14,000 years, categorizing planets with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Well, as well-oiled as a machine can be when it's run by 17 different species who can't agree on what constitutes breathable atmosphere. They had their system down to a science. Deathworld Class 1 through 12, each with neat little subcategories and color-coded filing systems that would make any obsessive-compulsive Zephyrian weep with joy. Class 1 was for those adorable little garden worlds where the most dangerous thing you might encounter was a particularly aggressive butterfly. Class 12 was reserved for planets that were literally trying to kill you just by existing. Places where the ground was made of acid, the air was poisonous, and the local wildlife had evolved specifically to eat starship hulls. It was a good system, a stable system, a system that had worked perfectly fine until some idiot decided to discover Earth. Commander Rex Holloway. And yes, his parents had actually named him Rex, because apparently they thought he was destined to either become a space marine or a particularly enthusiastic golden retriever. Stood in the observation deck of the GSV diplomatic nightmare and watched the blue-green marble of his homeworld rotate slowly beneath them. Behind him, the emergency session of the Galactic Classification Committee was in full swing, which is to say they were all frantically clicking, chirping, and in one case changing colors at each other while trying to figure out what the hell to do about humanity. The problem, announced Committee Chairman Vexthara, a tall, spindly being who looked like someone had taken a praying mantis and given it a law degree, is that humans don't fit anywhere in our classification system. Rex turned around, raising an eyebrow. What do you mean we don't fit? We're from Earth. Earth is a planet. Planets get classified. This isn't exactly rocket science here. The chairman's compound eyes fixed on him with the sort of look usually reserved for small children, who had just suggested that maybe the universe was actually made of cheese. Mr. Holloway, your species has managed to survive on a planet that, by all rights, should have killed you before you developed opposable thumbs. Earth registers as a Class 9 death world. Class 9? Rex shrugged. So what? That's not even the worst one. Mr. Holloway, interrupted Dr. Kethmari, the committee's xenobiologist, who resembled a cross between a jellyfish and a filing cabinet. You don't understand. Your planet has predators that can smell fear, weather systems that can level cities, and geological activity that regularly reshapes entire continents. Your oceans are filled with creatures that could swallow small spacecraft whole. Your atmosphere occasionally tries to kill you with storms that move at 300 kilometers per hour. Rex nodded along. Yeah, that sounds about right. So? So? The chairman's voice pitched up several octaves. Your species treats all of this as normal. You have sporting events based around surviving your planet's attempts to kill you. You call it camping and do it for fun. Well, when you put it like that, it does sound a little crazy, Rex admitted. But it's not like we're the only ones. I mean, you guys must have some tough planets too, right? The committee exchanged what could generously be called nervous glances. Committee member Graxlon, who looked like someone had crossed a bear with a houseplant, cleared his throat. Mr. Holloway, my homeworld of Brentar is classified as a Class 4 death world. The most dangerous predator we have is the snarling fluff beast, which is roughly the size of your domestic cats and primarily dangerous because it's very good at looking disappointed in you. Rex blinked. That's your idea of a dangerous predator? It has very sharp feelings, Graxlon said defensively. Right, Rex rubbed his temples. Okay, so we're from a tougher planet than most. That still doesn't explain why you can't just classify us as Class 9 and call it a day. Dr. Kethmari's gelatinous form quivered with what might have been excitement or terror. Because, Mr. Holloway, you don't just survive on your death world. You thrive on it. You've turned survival into an art form. We've been studying your species for the past 6 months, and we've discovered that humans don't just adapt to hostile environments. You actively seek them out and then complain when they're not hostile enough. That's not true, Rex protested. We don't seek out hostile environments, Mr. Holloway, the chairman said patiently. Your species has a recreational activity called mountaineering, where you deliberately climb the tallest, most dangerous peaks on your planet in conditions that would kill most galactic species instantly, for no other reason than because they're there. Well, yeah, but you have another activity called skydiving, where you jump out of perfectly functional aircraft at extreme altitudes, trusting your life to a piece of fabric. That's different. And don't get me started on something called extreme sports, which as far as we can tell, is just a category of activities designed to see how close you can come to dying without actually crossing the line. Rex opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. When you put it like that, humans did sound a little insane. Okay, so maybe we have some hobbies that other species might find a little intense. But that's just what we do for fun. It's not like we're trying to be dangerous. The entire committee fell silent. The kind of silence that usually preceded either profound wisdom or someone pointing out that the Emperor was, in fact, naked. Mr. Holloway, Dr. Kethmari said slowly, we've reviewed your species' historical records. You've turned warfare into a science. You've created weapons capable of destroying entire planets. You've survived ice ages, plague outbreaks, and natural disasters that would have wiped out most galactic civilizations. And somehow you've managed to do all of this while also developing art, music, literature, and philosophy. And the really terrifying part, added committee member Jill Nara, who looked like a cross between a butterfly and a particularly judgmental librarian, is that you've done all of this while simultaneously being capable of incredible kindness, compassion, and self-sacrifice. You're walking contradictions. Rex was beginning to get the feeling that this conversation was heading somewhere he didn't particularly want to go. So what are you saying exactly? Chairman Vex Thara straightened up to his full height, which was considerable. Mr. Holloway, after extensive deliberation, the Galactic Classification Committee has decided that Earth cannot be classified within our existing system. We've had to create an entirely new classification. New classification? Rex felt a sinking sensation in his stomach. What kind of new classification? Class 13, the chairman announced. Reserved specifically for planets that produce species so utterly, incomprehensibly dangerous that they manage to be both the most violent and most peaceful beings in the galaxy simultaneously. Rex stared at him. You created a new classification just for us? We didn't have a choice, Dr. Kethmari said. Every other species in the galaxy fits somewhere in our existing system. You're the first species we've encountered that we literally cannot categorize. And the really concerning part, added Graxlon, is that according to our projections, if we let your species loose on the galaxy without proper preparation, you'll either accidentally conquer it or accidentally save it, possibly both. Rex looked around the room at the assembled alien dignitaries, all of whom were regarding him with expressions that ranged from terror to fascination to what might have been respect. So what happens now? Now, Chairman Vex Thara said, we have to figure out how to introduce a Class 13 Deathworld species to the galactic community without causing a panic, a war, or an accidental renaissance. And frankly, Mr. Holloway, we're not entirely sure which of those outcomes would be worse. Rex nodded slowly. Right, so no pressure or anything. None at all, the chairman agreed. Now, shall we discuss the preliminary integration protocols? And that, Rex thought to himself, was how he ended up as humanity's first accidental ambassador to a galaxy that had just realized they might need to completely rethink their understanding of what it meant to be alive. Chapter 2. The Consultation. 3 weeks later, Rex found himself sitting in what the galactic community optimistically called a neutral meeting space, but which looked suspiciously like a cross between a corporate boardroom and a psychiatric evaluation center. The walls were a soothing shade of blue-green that was supposed to be calming to most species, and the furniture was designed to accommodate everything from his basic humanoid shape to the more exotic geometries of the committee members. The problem, as Rex was beginning to understand, was that the galaxy had gotten comfortable with predictability. For 14,000 years, they'd been cataloging species and planets with the confidence of librarians who'd never encountered a book that didn't fit neatly on a shelf. And then humanity had come along, and somehow managed to be the equivalent of a book that was simultaneously poetry, technical manual, horror novel, and comedy routine. The issue, Dr. Kethmari was explaining to the assembled group, is that human psychology doesn't make sense from a survival perspective. Most species develop either fight or flight responses. Humans appear to have developed fight or flight or befriend or study or adopt or weaponize responses. Rex sipped his water. The committee had been very proud of themselves for managing to provide him with something he could actually drink, and tried to look like he was taking this all very seriously. I mean, those all seem like reasonable responses to me. Mr. Holloway, said committee member Yildar, who looked like someone had given an octopus a medical degree. Your species' first response to discovering fire was to figure out how to make it bigger. Your first response to discovering sharp objects was to make them sharper. Your first response to discovering that space existed was to figure out how to get there. Well, yeah, that's just natural curiosity. Natural curiosity? Yildar's tentacles writhed in what Rex was learning to recognize as distress. Mr. Holloway, most species' first response to discovering something potentially dangerous is to avoid it. Your species' first response is to poke it with a stick. Sometimes we poke it with multiple sticks, Rex pointed out helpfully. The committee exchanged glances. Chairman Vexthara leaned forward. Mr. Holloway, we've been reviewing your species' historical records, and we've identified several concerning patterns. Such as? Well, for starters, your species has a tendency to domesticate things that should not be domesticated. You've taken wolves, apex predators, and turned them into companions. You've taken wild horses and convinced them to carry you around. You've taken cats, which are essentially miniature killing machines, and decided they make good pets. Rex shrugged. Dogs are man's best friend. Horses are useful for transportation. And cats are, well, okay, cats are kind of weird, but they're cute. Mr. Holloway, Dr. Kethmari interjected. You've domesticated plants that are actively trying to kill you. We have reports of something called hot peppers that your species cultivates specifically because they cause pain. They add flavor, Rex protested. They contain capsaicin, which is literally a chemical weapon designed to prevent mammals from eating them, Yildar pointed out. Your species' response to this natural defense mechanism was to develop a resistance to it and then breed the plants to make them even more painful to eat. Rex was beginning to see their point. Okay, so maybe we have some unusual eating habits. Unusual? Committee member Zithara, who resembled a cross between a crystal and a very judgmental mathematics teacher, began projecting holographic displays. Mr. Holloway, your species consumes ethanol, a poisonous substance, recreationally. You eat fermented dairy products. You consume beverages that contain enough caffeine to kill smaller species. Energy drinks aren't that bad, Rex said defensively. Mr. Holloway, Chairman Vexthara said gently, the average human consumes enough caffeine in a single day to put most galactic species into cardiac arrest. Rex paused. What's the average for most galactic species? 0, Dr. Kethmari said flatly. The recommended daily intake of caffeine for most species is 0. Huh. Rex considered this. That explains a lot about why everyone seems so tired all the time. The committee stared at him. Committee member Graxlon slowly raised one of his plant-like appendages. Mr. Holloway, are you saying that humans require stimulants to function normally? Not require, Rex said carefully. More like strongly prefer. Energy drinks help us wake up in the morning. Stimulants help us stay alert. It's not like we're addicted or anything. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that usually preceded either an intervention or a scientific breakthrough. Mr. Holloway, Chairman Vexthara said slowly, what happens if humans don't get caffeine? Rex thought about it. Well, we get headaches. And irritable. And some people get kind of violent, but it's not a big deal. We just consume more stimulants. You become violent without stimulants, Yildar said flatly. Not violent exactly, more like aggressively sleepy. Aggressively sleepy, Dr. Kethmari repeated. Mr. Holloway, that's not a normal state of being. It is for humans, Rex pointed out. Look, I get that we might be a little different from other species, but I don't see why that's such a big problem. Different doesn't mean dangerous. The committee exchanged glances again. This time, Rex was pretty sure he saw something that looked like pity. Mr. Holloway, Chairman Vexthara said carefully, we've been conducting some preliminary tests. We've exposed volunteers from various species to recordings of human activities, things your species considers normal, everyday behavior. And 17% of test subjects required medical attention. 43% requested to be relocated to different star systems. The remaining 40% filed formal complaints with the Galactic Ethics Committee. Rex blinked. What kind of activities? A recording of something called a typical human workout routine, Dr. Kethmari said. Apparently your species regularly engages in activities that would be considered torture by most galactic standards. Exercise isn't torture, Rex protested. It's good for you. Mr. Holloway, Graxlon said gently, your species deliberately causes itself pain in order to become stronger. That's not normal behavior. What do other species do to stay in shape? We exist? Zithara said, her crystalline form flickering. Most species maintain physical fitness through normal daily activities. We don't have specific exercises designed to exhaust ourselves to the point of collapse. Rex stared at them. But how do you build muscle? We don't, Yildar said. Most species have the muscle mass they need for their environment. We don't try to increase it. But what about sports, competition? We have recreational activities, Chairman Vexthara said. They're generally designed to be enjoyable and relaxing. What about games? We have games, Dr. Kethmari said. They're usually cooperative and designed to promote social bonding. Rex felt like he was missing something fundamental. But what about winning, competition, the thrill of victory? The committee stared at him blankly. Mr. Holloway, Chairman Vexthara said slowly, your species has created entertainment based on the concept of deliberately trying to defeat other members of your own species. Sports are fun, Rex said weakly. Mr. Holloway, Dr. Kethmary said, we've reviewed recordings of something called professional wrestling. As far as we can tell, it's a form of ritualized combat that your species performs for entertainment purposes. Wrestling's fake, Rex pointed out. That's worse! Yildar's tentacles writhed in distress. Your species has created fictional combat scenarios for entertainment. You've invented imaginary violence because real violence wasn't entertaining enough. Rex opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. When you put it like that, professional wrestling did sound a little weird. Mr. Holloway, Chairman Vexthara said, we need to ask you a very serious question. Is your species capable of peaceful coexistence with other galactic civilizations? Rex considered this. I mean, yeah, we're not monsters. We can be peaceful. But can you be peaceful without getting bored? Dr. Kethmary asked. Rex paused. That was actually a really good question. Well, I mean, we'd find things to do. Such as? We'd explore, learn, build things, create art, solve problems. Rex was warming to the topic. Humans are natural problem solvers. If there's a challenge, we'll figure out how to overcome it. And if there are no challenges, then we'll create some, Rex said automatically, then immediately realized how that sounded. I mean, not dangerous challenges, just interesting ones. The committee stared at him with what he was beginning to recognize as their humans are terrifying expression. Mr. Holloway, Chairman Vexthara said carefully, your species creates challenges when none exist? Well, yeah, that's how we grow. That's how we learn. That's how we become better. Better at what? Rex thought about it. Better at being human, I guess. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft humming of the life support systems and what sounded like Graxlon quietly photosynthesizing. Gentlemen, Chairman Vexthara said finally, I believe we're going to need a bigger classification system. Chapter 3. The Field Test. 2 months after the committee had declared humans to be an entirely new category of potentially dangerous, Rex found himself standing in the middle of what the galactic community politely called a controlled integration scenario, and what he was beginning to think of as the most awkward field trip in the history of space travel. The setting was Harmony Station, a massive space station that served as a sort of neutral ground for diplomatic meetings, trade negotiations, and apparently, testing whether humans could exist in civilized society without accidentally starting a war or inventing a new form of entertainment that would traumatize half the galaxy. The plan, explained Dr. Kethmary, who was floating beside him in what Rex had learned was their version of a nervous hover, is to introduce you to representatives from several major galactic civilizations in a series of controlled social interactions. We'll monitor their responses and adjust the integration protocols accordingly. Controlled social interactions, Rex repeated. You mean like talking to people? Talking to people, Dr. Kethmary confirmed, but carefully. Very carefully. We've prepared a list of topics that should be safe for cross-species discussion. Rex looked at the tablet they handed him. The list was depressingly short. Weather, theoretical mathematics, and the aesthetic properties of various nebulae? That's it? Mr. Holloway, Chairman Vexthara said, materializing beside them with that unsettling way he had of moving that made Rex think of a praying mantis in a business suit. We've had to eliminate most standard conversation topics because they tend to reveal disturbing aspects of human psychology. Such as? Well, we can't discuss food because humans eat things that shouldn't be eaten. We can't discuss entertainment because human entertainment tends to involve either violence or the simulation of violence. We can't discuss history because human history is essentially a catalog of increasingly creative ways to kill each other. We can't discuss hobbies because human hobbies tend to involve either danger or the simulation of danger. Rex stared at him. What do other species talk about? The weather, Dr. Kethmary said helpfully. The weather is very popular. What about work? Most species don't work in the human sense, Chairman Vexthara explained. They contribute to their societies through natural processes. The concept of jobs is fairly unique to species that have to actively fight for survival. What about family? Most species reproduce through budding or spore distribution, Dr. Kethmary said. The concept of families as distinct social units is also primarily a human construct. Rex was beginning to understand why the galaxy had been so peaceful for 14,000 years. So what do you people talk about? We share knowledge, Chairman Vexthara said. We contemplate the universe. We discuss the aesthetic properties of various stellar phenomena. That sounds... Rex searched for a diplomatic way to put it. Peaceful. It is peaceful, Dr. Kefmari agreed. Very peaceful. Sometimes we go for centuries without anyone saying anything particularly interesting. Rex nodded slowly. Right. So we're going to talk about weather and math and pretty space clouds. Pretty space clouds, Chairman Vexthara repeated. Yes, that's actually a very good way to put it. See? You're already learning to communicate in a less threatening manner. The first test subject was Ambassador Triluna of the Celestin Empire, who looked like someone had crossed a dolphin with a crystal chandelier. She was, according to Dr. Kethmari, representative of one of the galaxy's most advanced peaceful civilizations. Ambassador Triluna, Chairman Vexthara said formally, may I introduce Commander Rex Holloway of the human species? Ambassador Triluna's crystalline form chimed pleasantly. Greetings, Commander Holloway. I understand you're from Earth? That's right, Rex said, trying to sound as non-threatening as possible. It's a pleasure to meet you. The pleasure is mutual, Ambassador Triluna replied. I'm told Earth is classified as a Class 13 Deathworld. How fascinating. What's the weather like there? Rex relaxed slightly. Weather was safe. Oh, it varies a lot depending on where you are. We have deserts, forests, mountains, oceans, all kinds of different climate zones. Climate zones? Ambassador Triluna's form brightened with interest. How wonderful. On Celesta, we have a single stable climate that's been unchanged for approximately 3 million years. 3 million years? Rex blinked. Doesn't that get boring? The word boring seemed to hit Ambassador Triluna like a physical blow. Her crystalline form flickered and dimmed. Boring? I don't understand. Why would stability be boring? Rex glanced at Dr. Kethmari, who was making frantic gestures that he interpreted as, stop talking immediately. I just meant, don't you ever want things to change? To experience something new? Change? Ambassador Triluna's voice took on a note of what sounded like horror. Why would we want change? Change is unpredictable, dangerous. We've worked very hard to eliminate change from our society. But how do you grow? How do you learn? We don't, Ambassador Triluna said, as if this were obvious. We achieved perfect knowledge approximately 2 million years ago. There's been no need to learn anything new since then. Rex stared at her. You stopped learning 2 million years ago? Oh yes, Ambassador Triluna said proudly. We eliminated curiosity from our species through careful genetic modification. It was causing all sorts of problems. Questions, exploration, innovation. Very disruptive to social harmony. You eliminated curiosity, Rex repeated slowly. Completely, Ambassador Triluna confirmed. We're much happier now. No one ever wonders about anything, so no one is ever disappointed or confused. Rex looked at Dr. Kethmari, who was now making gestures that he interpreted as, whatever you're thinking of saying, don't. But don't you miss it? The excitement of discovery? The thrill of learning something new? Miss what? Ambassador Triluna asked. We don't remember what curiosity felt like. We eliminated the neural pathways associated with it. It's quite impossible for us to miss something we're no longer capable of understanding. Rex felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's life support systems. You can't understand curiosity? Not at all? Ambassador Triluna said cheerfully. We find the concept quite alien. The idea that someone would want to know something they don't already know is completely foreign to us. But then how do you... Rex struggled to find the words. How do you live? We exist, Ambassador Triluna said simply. We maintain our perfect society. We contemplate the aesthetic properties of various nebulae. We share knowledge that we already possess. It's very peaceful. Rex looked around the room at the assembled committee members, all of whom were watching him with expressions that ranged from curious to deeply concerned. And you're happy? Happiness is a dangerous emotion, Ambassador Triluna explained. It implies that there are things you don't have that you might want. We eliminated that as well. We experience contentment, which is much safer. You eliminated happiness, Rex said flatly. Oh yes. Along with sadness, anger, fear, love, hope, and ambition. Very disruptive emotions, all of them. We kept contentment and mild aesthetic appreciation. They're much easier to manage. Rex was quiet for a long moment. What about art? Art implies creativity, Ambassador Triluna said. Creativity implies that something new might be created. We eliminated creativity along with curiosity. We maintain a collection of pre-approved aesthetic objects that we created before we eliminated the capacity to create new ones. So you don't make new art? Why would we? We have perfectly adequate art already. Rex nodded slowly. Right, and music? Music can be emotionally stimulating, Ambassador Triluna said. We eliminated it as well. We have a collection of pleasant tones that we occasionally play for ambient sound. What about stories? Stories imply that things happen, Ambassador Triluna explained. Things happening can be unpredictable. We eliminated storytelling. We have a collection of approved information that we occasionally share with each other. Rex was beginning to understand why the galaxy had been so peaceful for so long. Ambassador Triluna, can I ask you something? Of course. What's the point? The point of what? The point of any of it. If you can't be curious, can't be creative, can't be happy, can't learn anything new, can't experience anything unexpected, what's the point of existing? Ambassador Triluna's form flickered with what might have been confusion. I don't understand the question. What gives your life meaning? Meaning? Ambassador Triluna's voice took on a note of bewilderment. We exist. We maintain the system. We contemplate nebulae. We share pre-approved information. We... She trailed off, her crystalline form dimming noticeably. We eliminated the concept of meaning, she said finally. It was causing existential anxiety in some of our citizens. Rex stared at her. You eliminated the concept of meaning from your lives? Yes, Ambassador Triluna said, but for the first time she sounded uncertain. It was for the best. Meaning implies that some things are more important than others. That can lead to conflict. But without meaning, what's the point of existing? We. Ambassador Triluna's form flickered more rapidly. We exist because we exist. We maintain the system because we maintain the system. We contemplate nebulae because... She stopped, her form now flickering so rapidly that Rex was starting to worry she might be having some kind of seizure. I don't know, she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know why we contemplate nebulae. The room fell silent except for the soft humming of the life support systems, and what sounded like Ambassador Triluna's crystalline form resonating with some kind of internal distress. Ambassador Triluna, Dr. Kethmari said gently, are you all right? I'm experiencing something, Ambassador Triluna said, her voice full of wonder and terror. Something I've never felt before. It's like there's something I want to know, something I want to understand. Chairman Vexthara and Dr. Kethmari exchanged alarmed glances. Ambassador, Chairman Vexthara said carefully, what you're experiencing is called curiosity. It's a normal human emotion, but it can be overwhelming for species that have eliminated it from their psychology. Curiosity, Ambassador Triluna whispered. Is this what humans feel all the time? Pretty much, Rex said. Well, that and about a dozen other emotions that you guys have eliminated. It's... Ambassador Triluna's form was now pulsing with a soft, rhythmic light. It's terrifying and wonderful, and I can't stop thinking about questions. So many questions. Why do we exist? What's beyond our star system? What would happen if we changed something? What if we created something new? Ambassador, Dr. Kethmari said urgently, you need to return to your ship immediately. Your species' medical teams need to examine you. But I don't want to return to my ship, Ambassador Triluna said, her voice full of something that Rex realized was excitement. I want to stay here. I want to learn things. I want to ask questions. I want to understand. Ambassador, Chairman Vexthara said firmly, you're experiencing what humans call a psychological awakening. For a species that has eliminated curiosity, this can be extremely dangerous. Dangerous. Ambassador Triluna's form brightened. You mean exciting? No, Dr. Kethmari said quickly. We mean dangerous. Curiosity can lead to questions. Questions can lead to exploration. Exploration can lead to change. Change can lead to conflict. But what if change leads to something better? Ambassador Triluna asked. What if there are things worth experiencing that we've never experienced? What if there are things worth learning that we've never learned? Rex watched as the committee members began to panic. This was apparently not how the controlled social interaction was supposed to go. Ambassador, Chairman Vexthara said desperately, please return to your ship. Your medical teams have treatments that can eliminate these feelings. But I don't want to eliminate them, Ambassador Triluna said. For the first time in my existence, I feel... alive. She turned to Rex, her crystalline form now blazing with light. Commander Holloway, is this what it's like to be human? Rex looked at her, then at the panicking committee members, then back at her. Yeah, he said finally. This is what it's like to be human. It's wonderful, Ambassador Triluna whispered. It's terrible and wonderful, and I never want it to stop. And that, Rex realized, was the moment when he began to understand just how dangerous humanity really was. Not because they were violent or aggressive or warlike, but because they were alive in a way that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten how to be. The committee was right to be worried. Humans weren't just a Class 13 Deathworld species. They were a contagion. Chapter 4. The Outbreak. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after what the official reports were calling the Triluna incident, but which Rex had started thinking of as the day I accidentally gave someone curiosity and probably started a galactic crisis. The council chambers were packed with representatives from across the galaxy, all of whom seemed to be in various states of panic, confusion, or what Rex was learning to recognize as the alien equivalent of existential dread. The air was thick with the sound of worried chittering, anxious color changing, and at least 3 different species emitting what could only be described as stress pheromones. Rex sat in what he was generously calling the defendant's chair, though nobody had officially accused him of anything yet, and tried to look like he hadn't accidentally destabilized 14,000 years of galactic civilization by having a conversation about weather. The situation, announced Supreme Arbiter Zilthek, who looked like someone had crossed a jellyfish with a courtroom judge, is unprecedented in galactic history. Chairman Vexthara stood up, his mantis-like form somehow managing to look both dignified and deeply disturbed. Arbiter Zilthek, as of this morning, we have confirmed reports of what we're calling curiosity outbreaks on 17 different worlds. 17? Rex blinked. But I only talked to one person. Ambassador Triluna returned to her homeworld, Dr. Kethmari explained, floating beside the chairman in what Rex was beginning to recognize as their we're all doomed position. She shared her experience with her colleagues, and then, Rex prompted. And then they started asking questions, Supreme Arbiter Zilthek said grimly. Questions about their society, questions about their history, questions about why they had eliminated curiosity in the first place. That sounds like a good thing, Rex said carefully. The assembled representatives turned to stare at him with expressions that ranged from horror to fascination to what looked like barely contained panic. Mr. Holloway, said Council Representative Kethmal, who resembled a cross between a tree and a very concerned accountant. The Celestans have begun dismantling their entire social structure. They're asking questions about everything, their government, their history, their purpose. They've started something they're calling research and exploration and creative expression. Again, Rex said slowly. That sounds like a good thing. Mr. Holloway, Supreme Arbiter Zilthek said patiently. The Celestans hadn't changed anything about their society for 3 million years. In the past 3 days, they've completely revolutionized their entire civilization. They've started creating new art, new music, new literature. They've begun asking questions about other star systems. They've started experimenting with new technologies. But that's amazing, Rex said. They're growing! They're learning! They're becoming more than they were! Mr. Holloway, Chairman Vexthara said gently. They've also started experiencing emotions they had eliminated millions of years ago. Joy, sorrow, anger, love, fear. They don't know how to handle these feelings. Their entire civilization is in chaos. Rex felt a sinking sensation in his stomach. Chaos? Not violent chaos, Dr. Kethmari said quickly, but overwhelming chaos. They're experiencing everything at once. They're asking questions faster than they can find answers. They're creating art faster than they can understand it. They're falling in love, breaking up, making friends, having arguments, writing poetry, composing music, inventing new technologies, and redesigning their entire society simultaneously. It's like watching a civilization have a nervous breakdown and a renaissance at the same time, added Council Representative Morthak, who looked like someone had given a houseplant a philosophy degree. Rex rubbed his temples. So what you're telling me is that I accidentally gave an entire civilization emotional intelligence, and they're having trouble adjusting? That's a very human way to put it, Supreme Arbiter Zilthek said, but essentially, yes. And this is spreading to other worlds? Oh yes, Chairman Vexthara said grimly. The Celestans have been sharing their experience with other civilizations. They're excited about their newfound curiosity, and they want to share it. They've started something they're calling cultural exchange programs. Cultural exchange programs, Rex repeated. That's not a bad thing, right? Mr. Holloway, Dr. Kethmari said. Most galactic civilizations haven't had cultural exchange in thousands of years. They've been content with their own societies. But now they're curious about other ways of living. They're starting to question their own systems. They're beginning to wonder if there might be better ways to exist. Rex looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives, all of whom were regarding him with expressions he was beginning to recognize as the alien equivalent of, "This is all your fault." "So, what you're saying," Rex said slowly, "is that I accidentally started a galactic-wide cultural revolution by having a conversation about weather?" "That's exactly what we're saying," Supreme Arbiter Zilthek confirmed. "And this is bad?" "Mr. Holloway," said Council Representative Vashti, who looked like someone had crossed a butterfly with a very anxious librarian. "Change is dangerous. Change leads to conflict. Conflict leads to war. War leads to suffering. We've maintained galactic peace for 14,000 years by eliminating the causes of conflict." "What causes of conflict did you eliminate?" Rex asked. "Curiosity," Vashti said. "Competition, ambition, creativity, innovation, passion, love, hate, fear, hope. Basically everything that makes life unpredictable." Rex stared at her. "You eliminated everything that makes life worth living?" "Everything that makes life dangerous," Vashti corrected. "We chose peace over passion, stability over growth, predictability over excitement. But that's not living," Rex said. "That's just existing." "Existing is safe," Council Representative Kethmal pointed out. "Existing is peaceful. Existing doesn't lead to war." "But existing doesn't lead to anything," Rex protested. "No growth, no discovery, no achievement, no love, no joy, no meaning. You've created a galaxy full of living beings who aren't actually alive." The chamber fell silent. The kind of silence that usually preceded either profound revelation or someone being thrown out an airlock. "Mr. Holloway," Supreme Arbiter Zilthek said carefully, "are you suggesting that our 14,000 years of galactic peace have been wrong?" Rex looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives, beings from across the galaxy who had somehow managed to create a civilization so peaceful that it had forgotten how to live. "I don't know if it's wrong," he said finally, "but I know it's not right." "What do you mean?" Chairman Vexthera asked. "I mean that peace without purpose is just slow death," Rex said. "Safety without growth is just a comfortable prison. Stability without change is just stagnation. You've created a galaxy that's safe and stable and peaceful, but you've also created a galaxy that's empty." "Empty?" Dr. Kethmari's gelatinous form quivered with what might have been indignation. "We've eliminated war, poverty, disease, conflict, and suffering. How is that empty?" "Because you've also eliminated everything that makes those things worth eliminating," Rex said. "You can't appreciate peace if you've never known conflict. You can't value safety if you've never experienced danger. You can't understand love if you've never felt fear. You can't create meaning if you've never questioned purpose." "But the suffering," Vashti began, "is what makes joy meaningful," Rex interrupted. "The fear is what makes courage valuable. The uncertainty is what makes discovery exciting. The possibility of failure is what makes success worthwhile. And the possibility of war," Supreme Arbiter Zilthek asked, "is what makes peace precious," Rex said. "Look, I'm not saying that suffering is good or that war is desirable. I'm saying that eliminating the possibility of bad things happening also eliminates the possibility of good things meaning anything." The chamber was quiet for a long moment. Then Council Representative Morthak spoke up. "Mr. We break things, and then we build them back better." "And if this leads to war?" Dr. Kethmari asked. "Then you'll learn to prevent wars," Rex said. "Not by eliminating everything that could cause them, but by building something worth preserving, by creating meaning worth protecting, by becoming people worth fighting for." "And if this leads to suffering?" Vashti asked. "Then you'll learn to ease suffering," Rex said. "Not by eliminating the possibility of pain, but by creating the possibility of healing, by building communities that support each other, by becoming people who care enough about each other to make sacrifices for the greater good." Rex stood up, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. "You've spent 14,000 years trying to create a perfect galaxy," he said. "But perfection isn't the absence of problems. Perfection is the presence of people who care enough to solve problems. You've created a galaxy without problems, but you've also created a galaxy without people who care." "And you believe humans can teach us to care?" Supreme Arbiter Zilthek asked. "I believe humans can teach you to live," Rex said. "And once you remember how to live, you'll remember how to care. And once you remember how to care, you'll remember how to create something worth caring about." The chamber was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, Council Representative Morthak raised one of his plant-like appendages. "Mr. Holloway," he said, "I believe I would like to learn how to live." One by one, the other representatives began to speak up, some expressing curiosity, some expressing fear, some expressing something that might have been hope. And Rex realized that he wasn't just humanity's first accidental ambassador to the galaxy. He was the galaxy's first accidental teacher of what it meant to be alive. Chapter 5. The New Curriculum. 6 months after what the historical records would eventually call the Great Awakening. Though Rex preferred to think of it as the day I convinced an entire galaxy to start acting like living beings, he found himself standing in front of what was optimistically being called the Galactic Life Skills Academy. The Academy was, according to its official charter, an educational institution dedicated to teaching advanced civilizations how to experience existence as more than mere maintenance of biological functions. Unofficially, it was a crash course in how to be alive for species that had spent millennia trying to be as unalive as possible, while still technically breathing. Rex's first class consisted of 12 representatives from different species, all of whom were staring at him with expressions that ranged from eager anticipation to barely concealed terror. He'd been assured that these were volunteers, but given that most of their species had eliminated the concept of volunteering along with most other forms of personal initiative, he wasn't entirely sure what that meant. "Good morning," Rex said, trying to sound like he had any idea what he was doing. "Welcome to Introduction to Emotional Intelligence, or as I like to call it, Feelings 101. The class stared at him blankly. "Right," Rex said. "So first question. How many of you have ever experienced an emotion?" Silence. "Any emotion at all?" More silence. "Okay, how about this? How many of you have ever wanted something?" One tentative appendage rose from the back of the room. It belonged to student designation Hiktar, who looked like someone had crossed a sea anemone with a particularly anxious graduate student. "Yes, Hiktar? I think I might have wanted something yesterday," Hiktar said hesitantly. "But I'm not sure if it was actually wanting or just metabolic requirement fulfillment." "What did you want?" Rex asked. "I wanted to know what that plant tasted like," Hiktar said, pointing to a decorative fern in the corner of the room. "But that's not normal, is it? My species eliminated curiosity about non-nutritional substances thousands of years ago." "That's perfect," Rex said, causing several students to recoil in alarm. "That's exactly what we're talking about. You experience curiosity. Curiosity is an emotion. Congratulations, you've just had your first feeling." "Is that good?" Hiktar asked nervously. "It's fantastic," Rex said. "Curiosity is how we learn. It's how we grow. It's how we discover new things about the universe and about ourselves. But curiosity can lead to dangerous behavior," pointed out student designation Vril Ah, who resembled a cross between a butterfly and a very concerned safety inspector. "What if Hiktar had eaten the plant and it was poisonous?" "Then Hiktar would have learned that the plant was poisonous," Rex said. "And then he would have learned to be more careful about what he eats. And then he would have learned to test things before eating them. And then he would have learned to ask questions before testing things." "But what if he died?" Vrilla persisted. "Then he would have learned a very important lesson about the consequences of eating unknown plants," Rex said. "And the rest of us would have learned from his mistake." "But he would be dead," Vrilla pointed out. "Yes, he would be dead," Rex agreed. "And that would be sad. And we would miss him. And we would be angry at ourselves for not stopping him. And we would be determined to prevent it from happening again. And all of those feelings would motivate us to be better, to be smarter, to be more careful, to be more caring." The class stared at him with expressions that suggested they were beginning to understand just how fundamentally different human psychology was from their own. "Mr. Holloway," said student designation Zephini, who looked like someone had given a crystal formation a doctorate in philosophy, "are you saying that the possibility of death makes life more meaningful?" "I'm saying that the possibility of loss makes what we have more precious," Rex said. "If you can't lose something, then having it doesn't mean anything. If you can't fail, then succeeding doesn't mean anything. If you can't die, then living doesn't mean anything." "But we can die," pointed out student designation Morphal, who appeared to be some kind of sentient liquid in a containment suit. "We just try very hard not to." "Trying not to die is survival," Rex said. "Choosing to live despite the possibility of death is courage. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" Hiktar asked. "Survival is about avoiding negative outcomes," Rex explained. "Courage is about pursuing positive outcomes despite the risk of negative consequences. Survival is reactive. Courage is proactive." "I don't understand," Vrilla said. "Why would anyone choose to risk negative consequences?" "Because the alternative is never experiencing positive consequences," Rex said. "Look, let me give you an example. Hiktar, you were curious about that plant, right?" "Yes," Hiktar said nervously. "And you could have just ignored that curiosity and been safe?" Yes. But instead you chose to acknowledge it and talk about it? Yes. Why? Hiktar was quiet for a moment. Because ignoring it felt wrong, like I was missing something important. Exactly, Rex said. That feeling of missing something important. That's what we call dissatisfaction. And dissatisfaction is what motivates us to take risks, to explore, to grow, to become more than we are. But dissatisfaction is uncomfortable, Morphal pointed out. Why would we want to feel uncomfortable? Because comfort without challenge is just stagnation, Rex said. And stagnation is just slow death. Discomfort motivates us to change, to improve, to grow. It's how we become better versions of ourselves. But what if we like ourselves the way we are? Zephany asked. Then you'll never become who you could be, Rex said. And that's the saddest thing of all. The class was quiet for a long moment. Then Hiktar raised his appendage again. Mr. Holloway, he said, I think I'm feeling something right now. What are you feeling? Rex asked. I'm feeling sad, Hiktar said. Sad that I've spent so much of my existence not feeling anything. Sad that I've missed so much. Sad that I've been existing instead of living. That's perfect, Rex said. That sadness you're feeling? That's regret. And regret is what motivates us to make better choices in the future. But regret is painful, Hiktar said. Yes, it is, Rex agreed. But it's also valuable. Pain teaches us lessons that comfort never can. And the lessons we learn from pain are the ones we remember best. I think I'm feeling something too, Vrilla said suddenly. I'm feeling angry. What are you angry about? Rex asked. I'm angry that no one ever taught us this before, Vrilla said, her butterfly-like wings fluttering with agitation. I'm angry that we've spent thousands of years being told that feelings were dangerous when they're actually wonderful. That's another perfect example, Rex said. That anger you're feeling, that's righteous indignation. And righteous indignation is what motivates us to fight injustice and create positive change. But anger leads to violence, Morphal pointed out. That's why we eliminated it. Anger can lead to violence, Rex corrected. But it can also lead to justice, to progress, to positive change. The key is learning to channel anger constructively instead of destructively. How do we do that? Zephany asked. By caring about something more than we care about our anger, Rex said. By loving something more than we hate the thing that made us angry. By building something better instead of just tearing down what we don't like. And that's what humans do? Hiktar asked. That's what humans try to do, Rex said. We don't always succeed. We make mistakes. We fail. We hurt each other. We hurt ourselves. But we also learn from our mistakes. We get back up after we fall. We forgive each other. We try again. We build something better. And this is good? Vrilla asked. It's human, Rex said. And being human means accepting that life is complicated and messy and painful and beautiful and meaningful and worth living. I want to be human, Hiktar said suddenly. You can't be human, Rex said gently. But you can be alive. You can feel. You can grow. You can love. You can create. You can build something meaningful. How? Morphal asked. By starting with today, Rex said. By making one choice that's based on what you want instead of what you're supposed to want. By taking one risk. By asking one question. By caring about one thing. By feeling one emotion. And tomorrow? Zephany asked. Tomorrow you do it again, Rex said. And the day after that. And the day after that. And slowly over time you become someone who's alive instead of someone who's just existing. And if we make mistakes? Vrilla asked. Then you learn from them, Rex said. And you try again. And you become better. And you help others become better too. The class was quiet for a long moment. Then one by one they began to speak. I want to try, Hiktar said. I want to feel, Vrilla said. I want to grow, Morphal said. I want to live, Zephany said. Rex looked around the classroom at his students, beings from across the galaxy who were taking their first tentative steps toward becoming truly alive. Then that's exactly what we'll do, he said. We'll learn to live. And as he watched his students begin to experience their first real emotions, curiosity, excitement, fear, hope, Rex realized that he wasn't just teaching them how to be human, he was teaching them how to be themselves. Chapter 6. The Graduation. 1 year after the Great Awakening, Rex stood in the central plaza of New Harmony Station, the rebuilt version of the original station, now designed to accommodate beings who had discovered that they actually enjoyed things like color, music, and the occasional spontaneous celebration, and watched what could only be described as the galaxy's first talent show. The transformation had been remarkable. Where once there had been sterile corridors and beige walls, There were now murals painted by Celestins who had rediscovered art, gardens tended by Brentari who had learned to appreciate beauty, and sculptures created by Zephyrians who had figured out that making things was more interesting than just maintaining them. The talent show itself was Ambassador Triluna's idea. She had approached Rex 3 months ago with what she called a proposal for public expression of individual creativity, but which Rex had recognized as the universal desire to show off that seemed to emerge in every species once they rediscovered the joy of being alive. "Commander Holloway," came a familiar chiming voice behind him. Rex turned to see Ambassador Triluna approaching, her crystalline form now regularly cycling through colors that hadn't existed in Celestan society for 3 million years. "Are you ready for our little performance?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Rex said, watching as various species set up what appeared to be instruments, art installations, and in one case what looked like a small volcano. Though I have to admit, I'm a little nervous about what some of these acts might involve. "Oh, don't worry," Triluna said cheerfully. "We've learned to be careful. Well, mostly careful." Hiktar did have to be talked out of his interpretive dance about the life cycle of dangerous plants, but I think we've managed to keep things relatively safe. "Relatively safe," Rex repeated. "That's not as reassuring as you might think." "Commander," Triluna said, her form flickering with what Rex had learned to recognize as amusement. "You're the one who taught us that safety without risk is just stagnation. Besides, what's the worst that could happen?" Rex looked around the plaza at the assembled crowd of beings who had spent the past year learning to feel emotions, express creativity, and take risks. "You know what? I'm probably better off not knowing." The first act was a group of Brentari who had formed something they called a musical ensemble. Since their species communicated primarily through subsonic vibrations, their music was more felt than heard, but the emotional impact was undeniable. Rex found himself moved to tears by what could only be described as the sound of an entire species learning to express joy. The second act was a Zephyrian named Klexthi, who had discovered poetry. His piece, titled Ode to the Terrifying Beauty of Existence, was a haunting meditation on the difference between living and merely surviving. It ended with the lines, "We who were content to be, now dare to become we who feared to feel, now choose to love. We who avoided questions, now embrace the unknown. We who sought only safety, now find meaning in risk." The third act was where things got interesting. Vrilla, one of Rex's former students, had apparently decided that the best way to express her newfound appreciation for life was through what she called extreme interpretive flight. This involved her using her butterfly-like wings to perform increasingly complex aerial maneuvers, while narrating her emotional journey over the past year. "This represents my fear of change," she announced, executing a series of tight spirals that made Rex dizzy to watch. "And this represents my acceptance of uncertainty," she continued, diving toward the ground and pulling up at the last second. "Is she going to be okay?" Rex asked Dr. Kethmari, who was floating beside him with what appeared to be a medical kit. "Probably," Dr. Kethmari said. "She's been practicing for weeks, though I should mention that her species has never actually performed aerial acrobatics before. This is entirely new behavior." "Of course it is," Rex muttered, watching as Vrilla performed what could only be described as a loop-de-loop, while delivering a soliloquy about the nature of courage. The fourth act was a collaborative piece by several species who had decided to create what they called living art. It involved a group of Morphians, the liquid species, shaping themselves into various forms, while Celestans provided color and light effects, and Zephyrians provided musical accompaniment. The result was a constantly shifting display of light, color, sound, and movement that somehow managed to tell the story of the galaxy's awakening. "It's beautiful," Rex said, genuinely moved by the sight of different species working together to create something that none of them could have created alone. "It's also completely improvised," Triluna mentioned casually. "They decided that planning the performance in advance would be too limiting. They're making it up as they go along." "They're improvising?" Rex stared at the performance, which was now involving what appeared to be a light show synchronized with musical tones and fluid sculptures that were somehow forming recognizable shapes. "How is that even possible?" "They're learning to trust each other," Triluna said. "They're learning to communicate without words. They're learning to create something together that's greater than the sum of its parts." "They're learning to be alive," Rex said softly. "Yes," Triluna agreed. "They're learning to be alive." The fifth act was Hiktar's much-anticipated presentation about dangerous plants. He had, thankfully, been talked out of the interpretive dance, but had instead created what he called an educational performance about the relationship between risk and discovery. This turned out to involve him actually eating various plants, Some safe, some mildly toxic, some completely unknown, while explaining the emotional and intellectual journey of discovery that each bite represented. "This plant," he announced, chewing thoughtfully on something that looked like it might bite back, "represents the fear of the unknown. It tastes terrible, but it won't kill me. The fear of trying it was worse than the actual experience." "Is he going to be okay?" Rex asked Dr. Kethmari again. "Probably," Dr. Kethmari said, though their gelatinous form was now quivering with what appeared to be nervousness. "He's been building up immunity to various toxins for months. It's actually quite impressive from a biological standpoint. And from a safety standpoint, well, Dr. Kethmari said carefully, his species has never deliberately consumed potentially harmful substances for educational purposes before. This is entirely new behavior." "Why does everyone keep saying that?" Rex muttered. "Because it's true," Triluna said. "Everything we're doing tonight is new. We're creating culture where none existed before. We're expressing individuality in species that had eliminated individual expression. We're taking risks for the sake of art and beauty and meaning. And that doesn't worry you?" "Terrifies me," Triluna said cheerfully. "But that's what makes it wonderful. The terror means it matters. The risk means it has value. The uncertainty means it's real." The sixth act was a surprise. Supreme Arbiter Zilthek, the ancient jellyfish-like being who had presided over the emergency council session a year ago, had apparently decided to participate in the talent show. His act was simple. He told a story. But it was the first story that had been told in the galaxy for thousands of years, and it was about the day a human had asked him what gave his life meaning. "I told him that we existed to maintain the system," Zilthek said, his translucent form glowing softly in the plaza's lights. "And he asked me what the point of maintaining the system was if the system had no purpose beyond maintaining itself." "And what did you realize?" someone called out from the audience. "I realized that I had been dead for a very long time," Zilthek said, "and that this human was offering me the chance to come back to life." The plaza fell silent. Then, slowly, beings from across the galaxy began to make sounds that Rex realized were the equivalent of applause. Chiming, humming, clicking, and in some cases, changing colors in synchronized patterns. "And what did you do?" Triluna asked. "I chose to live," Zilthek said simply. "I chose to feel. I chose to care. I chose to risk everything I had for the chance to become something more than I was." "And was it worth it?" Rex asked. Zilthek's ancient form pulsed with soft light. "Commander Holloway, for the first time in my existence, I can honestly say that I am alive. Not just surviving, not just existing, but truly alive. I have purpose. I have meaning. I have friends. I have fears and hopes and dreams and regrets and joys and sorrows." He paused, his form brightening. "And yes, it was worth it. Every moment of uncertainty, every risk, every failure, every success. It was all worth it for the chance to be truly alive." The final act was Rex himself. He hadn't planned to perform, but the crowd had insisted, and he found himself standing in the center of the plaza with no idea what he was supposed to do. "I don't have a talent," he said finally. "I mean, I don't sing or dance or create art or anything like that. I'm just a guy who happened to have a conversation about weather that accidentally started a galactic revolution." The crowd laughed, another sound that was new to the galaxy. "But I guess," Rex continued, "if I have any talent at all, it's that I'm good at being human. And being human means being curious about things, caring about people, taking risks for the sake of growth, and never being satisfied with just existing when you could be living." He looked around the plaza at the assembled beings, creatures from across the galaxy who had learned to feel, to create, to risk, to love, to live. "A year ago you asked me what gave my life meaning," he said. "And I told you that meaning comes from caring about something more than your own safety, from building something worth preserving, from becoming someone worth being." He smiled. "Tonight, I can say that my life has meaning because I got to watch all of you discover what it means to be alive. I got to be part of your journey from existing to living. I got to see you become yourselves." The plaza erupted in the galaxy's first standing ovation, a cacophony of sounds, colors, and movements that somehow managed to express the shared joy of beings who had learned to celebrate life. As the noise died down, Rex looked around at the faces, or face equivalents, of the beings who had become his friends, his students, his teachers, and his fellow travelers on the journey from survival to life. "So," he said, "what do we do now?" Ambassador Triluna stepped forward, her crystalline form blazing with all the colors of the spectrum. "Now, Commander Holloway, we live, we explore, we create, we love, we risk, we fail, we succeed, we become. And if we make mistakes," someone called out, Then we learn from them, the crowd called back in unison. And if we fail, then we try again. And if we succeed, then we celebrate. And then we find new challenges. Rex nodded, feeling something that he realized was pride, not just in what they had accomplished, but in what they had become. Then let's get started, he said. And as the galaxy's first talent show dissolved into the galaxy's first spontaneous celebration, Rex realized that he wasn't just humanity's first ambassador to the stars. He was the first human to witness the birth of a truly living galaxy. Epilogue. The new normal, 5 years after the Great Awakening, Rex stood in his office aboard the diplomatic vessel Second Chances and read the morning reports from across the galaxy. The transformation had been remarkable, though not without its challenges. The Celestans had become the galaxy's first space explorers in millennia, driven by an insatiable curiosity about what lay beyond their solar system. They had also become the galaxy's first species to experience something called teenage rebellion, as their younger generations began questioning everything their elders had accepted for millions of years. The Brentari had discovered agriculture, not just growing food, but growing it beautifully. Their planets had become gardens that were works of art, and they had begun sharing their techniques with other species. They had also discovered something called creative differences, leading to the galaxy's first artistic movements and counter-movements. The Zephyrians had become musicians, composers, and poets. Their music had evolved from simple harmonic vibrations to complex symphonies that told stories of love, loss, hope, and discovery. They had also discovered something called artistic temperament, leading to the galaxy's first dramatic breakups and passionate reconciliations. The Morphians had become architects, using their fluid forms to create buildings that were simultaneously functional and beautiful. They had also discovered something called personal space, leading to the galaxy's first housing shortage as beings realized they wanted homes that reflected their individual personalities. And the galaxy as a whole had discovered something that Rex had tried to prepare them for, but which had still come as a shock. Conflict. Not war. The galaxy was still too young in its emotional development for that level of organized violence. But disagreement, argument, competition, and the occasional passionate dispute about art, philosophy, or the best way to arrange furniture. Rex's communicator chimed, and Dr. Kethmari's voice filled the office. "Commander, we have a situation in the Vega sector." "What kind of situation?" Rex asked, though he had a feeling he already knew. "The Zephyrian composer Yilthara and the Celestan light artist Crystal are having what they're calling a creative dispute about their collaborative piece for the upcoming Galactic Arts Festival. It's escalated." "How escalated?" Rex asked wearily. "They've challenged each other to something they're calling artistic combat. They want to settle their differences through competing performances." Rex rubbed his temples. "And this is a problem because 17 other artists have taken sides and declared their intention to participate in what they're now calling the Great Art War of Creative Expression. The entire festival is threatening to turn into a galaxy-wide aesthetic battlefield." "Of course it is," Rex muttered. "I'll be right there." 3 hours later, Rex found himself standing in the middle of what could only be described as the galaxy's first artistic standoff. On one side, Yilthara and his supporters had created a massive sonic installation that was expressing their emotional position through what sounded like a combination of whale song and industrial machinery. On the other side, Crystal and her allies had constructed a light show that was apparently conveying their philosophical stance through patterns that were making Rex's eyes water. "Commander Holloway!" Yilthara called out, his crystalline form resonating with passionate intensity. "You must settle this dispute. Crystal refuses to acknowledge that our collaborative piece should prioritize auditory experience over visual spectacle. That's because auditory experience is fundamentally limited in its ability to convey complex spatial relationships." Crystal shot back, her light form blazing with indignation. "Visual art can express concepts that sound cannot even approach." "Oh, please," interrupted a voice from the crowd. Rex turned to see Hiktar, his former student, now apparently a respected critic of what the galaxy had begun calling experiential art. "You're both wrong. True art must engage all the senses simultaneously. Anything less is just masturbatory self-expression." The artistic crowd gasped. Rex was pretty sure that masturbatory self-expression had never been said in Galactic Common before, and he wasn't entirely sure how Hiktar had even learned the concept. "Hiktar," Rex said carefully, "where did you learn that phrase?" "Human internet," Hiktar said proudly. "I've been studying Earth art criticism. It's wonderfully vicious. You humans have turned art appreciation into a contact sport." "We've turned everything into a contact sport," Rex pointed out. That's not necessarily something to emulate. But it's so passionate, Yilthara exclaimed.
So full of conviction, so alive. It's also completely insane, added Vrilla, fluttering overhead.
Which, I'm beginning to understand, is part of the point. Rex looked around at the assembled artists, all of whom were regarding him with expressions that suggested they expected him to solve their creative differences through some kind of human wisdom.
Okay, he said finally. Here's what we're going to do.
You're all going to step back, take a deep breath, and remember that the point of art isn't to win arguments. It's to express truth, to create beauty, and to share experiences that help us understand ourselves and each other better. But how do we determine whose artistic vision is correct? Crystal asked.
You don't, Rex said. That's the point.
Art isn't about being correct. It's about being honest. It's about expressing something that matters to you in a way that might help other people understand what it feels like to be you. But what if my artistic vision conflicts with someone else's? Yilthara asked. Then you both create your art and let people decide which one speaks to them, Rex said. Or better yet, you learn from each other and create something neither of you could have made alone. But what about the competition? Hiktar asked. The artistic combat? The great art war of creative expression? Rex sighed. You can have your competition if you want, but remember that the goal isn't to destroy each other's art. It's to push each other to create better art. Competition should make you stronger, not make your opponents weaker. So we can have artistic combat? Vrilla asked eagerly. You can have artistic competition, Rex corrected. Combat implies that someone has to lose. Competition implies that everyone can become better. The crowd considered this. Then Yilthara stepped forward. Commander Holloway, he said, would you judge our competition? I'm not qualified to judge your art, Rex said. I don't understand half of what you create. But you understand what it means to be alive, Crystal said. You understand what it means to care about something. That's all art really is. Caring about something enough to share it with others. Rex looked around at the assembled artists, beings from across the galaxy who had learned to create, to express, to compete, to care. All right, he said finally, but we're going to do this the human way. What's the human way? Hiktar asked. We're going to make it fun, Rex said. We're going to celebrate everyone's work. We're going to learn from each other. We're going to push each other to be better. And at the end of it, we're going to remember that the real victory isn't beating someone else. It's becoming better than you were before. 6 months later, Rex stood in the main auditorium of New Harmony Station and watched the closing ceremony of what had become known as the first Galactic Festival of Competitive Artistic Expression. The event had grown from 17 arguing artists to over 3,000 participants from across the galaxy. The festival had featured everything from traditional art forms that had been dormant for millennia to entirely new art forms that had been invented during the competition itself. There had been music that could only be heard by beings with specialized sensory organs, sculptures that existed in 11 dimensions, poetry written in colors, and at least one interpretive dance performed by a gaseous cloud that had achieved sentience. Commander, Ambassador Triluna said, approaching him with her usual kaleidoscope of colors. I wanted to thank you. For what? Rex asked. For teaching us how to fight, she said. For teaching us that conflict doesn't have to mean destruction. For teaching us that we can compete with each other without trying to destroy each other. You learned that on your own, Rex said. I just suggested it was possible. You did more than suggest, Triluna said. You showed us that being alive means caring about things enough to fight for them. But you also showed us that fighting for something doesn't mean fighting against everyone else. Rex nodded, watching as beings from across the galaxy celebrated their achievements, shared their creations, and planned collaborations for the future. So what's next? He asked. Triluna's form brightened. Next we explore. We've had requests from 17 different species to help them establish cultural exchange programs. We've had inquiries from 43 worlds that want to learn about art and creativity and expression. And we've had 3 different civilizations ask us to teach them how to have healthy conflicts. Healthy conflicts, Rex repeated. I like that. It's what you taught us, Triluna said. That conflict isn't the opposite of peace. Stagnation is the opposite of peace. Conflict is what happens when people care enough about different things to argue about them. And as long as they're arguing about ideas instead of trying to destroy each other, conflict makes everyone stronger. Rex smiled, looking out at the galactic community that had learned to live, to feel, to create, to compete, and to care. You know, he said, when I first got here, the committee was worried that humans were too dangerous to integrate into galactic society. They were right, Triluna said. You are dangerous, you're dangerously alive. You're dangerously passionate. You're dangerously curious. You're dangerously creative. You're dangerously capable of caring about things. And that's a problem? Rex asked. That's exactly what we needed, Treluna said. We spent 14,000 years being safe and stable and peaceful and empty. You taught us that safety isn't the absence of danger. It's the presence of something worth protecting. You taught us that stability isn't the absence of change. It's the ability to adapt to change. You taught us that peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the ability to resolve conflict constructively. She paused, her form cycling through colors that Rex had learned meant deep contentment. Most importantly, she said, you taught us that being alive isn't about avoiding death. It's about finding reasons to keep living. Rex nodded, watching as the festival continued around them, beings from across the galaxy celebrating their first year of truly being alive. So, he said, I guess the question now is, what do we do with a galaxy full of living beings? Triluna's form blazed with all the colors of possibility. We see what they become, she said. We see what we all become. And as Rex watched the galaxy's first generation of truly living beings begin to plan their future, full of art and exploration and discovery and healthy competition and passionate disagreement and creative collaboration, he realized that the committee had been right about one thing. Humans were dangerous. They were dangerously contagious with life itself. And sometimes, Rex thought, as he watched a group of young beings from 12 different species working together to plan an interstellar art project that would probably terrify their elders and inspire their peers, being dangerously alive was exactly what the universe needed. The galaxy had created a new classification just for humans. Class 13. Too dangerous to categorize. But Rex preferred to think of it differently. Class 13, too alive to ignore. And as far as he was concerned, that was the best classification any species could hope for. The end.